The gunshot cracked through the night like lightning, sending a flock of starlings into the darkening sky as Olivia Owens stumbled through the brush, her heart hammering against her ribs, the taste of dust and fear coating her tongue. The year was 1873, and the unforgiving terrain of the Arizona Territory offered little sanctuary for a woman on the run. Blood trickled down her arm from where the bullet had grazed her, but she couldn't stop, not with Jasper Quinn and his men still hunting her, determined to silence the only witness to their brutal stagecoach robbery. Her foot caught on an exposed root, sending her sprawling into the dirt. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to rise, the sound of hoofbeats growing closer. Tears streamed down her dirt-smudged face as she dragged herself behind a large boulder, pressing her back against the cool stone. The hoofbeats slowed, and Olivia held her breath. The creak of leather announced a rider dismounting nearby. Heavy footsteps approached her hiding place, and she knew she'd been found. As a shadow fell over her, she looked up into the stern face of a man she didn't recognize, not one of Quinn's gang, but a stranger whose eyes were as cold and gray as a winter sky. The Winchester rifle in his hands was pointed squarely at her chest. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't kill me." The man's weathered face remained impassive for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, perhaps, or the slightest twitch at the corner of his mouth. "I'll give you life," he answered, his voice low and gravelly. Before she could respond, he reached down and pulled her to her feet, his grip firm but not painful. "But we need to move, now." "Who are you?" Olivia asked, wincing as she put weight on her injured ankle. "Ethan Vance," he replied, guiding her toward his horse. "And from the looks of things, you're in a heap of trouble, madam." In one fluid motion, he lifted her onto his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood still despite the tension in the air. Ethan swung up behind her, one arm wrapped securely around her waist as he urged the horse forward. "They're going to kill me," Olivia said, her body trembling against his. "Jasper Quinn and his men, they murdered everyone on that stagecoach. I was gathering herbs in the hills when I saw it happen. They saw me watching." Ethan's arm tightened around her. "Quinn's got a reputation. If he's after you, we need to put some distance between us and this place." They rode in silence as the sun disappeared completely, leaving only a silver of moon to light their way. Olivia's fear gradually gave way to exhaustion, her body slumping against Ethan's chest. Despite her predicament, there was something reassuring about the steady beat of his heart against her back. "My cabin's about an hour's ride from here," Ethan said after a while. "It's not much, but it's well hidden. You'll be safe there until we figure out what to do." Olivia wanted to ask why he was helping her, why this stranger had chosen to risk his life for someone he'd never met. But fatigue claimed her before she could form the words. She awoke to the gentle touch of calloused fingers against her forehead. Opening her eyes, she found herself lying on a narrow bed in a small but tidy cabin. Ethan stood over her, concern etched into the lines of his face. "You've got a fever," he said, dipping a cloth into a basin of water and placing it on her forehead. "That bullet wound needs tending." Olivia glanced at her arm, where dried blood had formed a crusty path from shoulder to elbow. "It's just a graze." "Even grazes can fester," Ethan replied, reaching for a bottle of whiskey. "This is going to sting." She bit her lip to keep from crying out as he cleaned the wound, his hands surprisingly gentle for a man who looked like he'd spent his life in the harshest conditions the West had to offer. "You're good at this," she observed, watching as he bandaged her arm with clean strips of cloth. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Had plenty of practice, spent 3 years with the cavalry before striking out on my own. And now I hunt bounties when I need money and keep to myself the rest of the time." He finished tying off the bandage and stepped back. "Your ankle's swollen too. Nothing broken, but you won't be running anywhere for a few days." Olivia sank back against the pillow, the implications of her situation crashing down on her. "I can't stay here. I'll put you in danger. Quinn doesn't let witnesses live." Ethan's jaw tightened. I've dealt with men like Quinn before. Rest now. We'll talk more in the morning." Despite her protests, exhaustion claimed her again, and Olivia drifted into a fitful sleep, haunted by dreams of gunfire and the terrified screams of stagecoach passengers. When she awoke again, pale morning light filtered through the cabin's single window. Ethan was nowhere to be seen, but a cup of steaming coffee sat on the small table beside the bed. Wincing, Olivia sat up and reached for it, grateful for its warmth. The cabin door opened and Ethan entered carrying an armful of firewood. His eyes met hers and for a moment neither spoke. "You're looking better," he finally said, setting the wood beside the stone fireplace. "Thanks to you." Olivia took a sip of coffee, studying him over the rim of the cup. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly, the streaks of gray at his temples, the scar that ran along his jawline, the way his shoulders carried an invisible weight. He couldn't be more than 35, but his eyes held the weariness of a much older man. "I need to know exactly what you saw," Ethan said, taking a seat on a wooden chair across from her. "Everything about Quinn and his men." Olivia set the cup down, her hands shaking slightly. "I was collecting yarrow for my medicines." "I'm a healer at least. I was apprenticing with Dr. Phillips in Silver Creek." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I heard the stagecoach before I saw it, then shots. By the time I reached a place where I could see, Quinn and his men had already stopped the coach. There were 5 of them, all armed." Her voice faltered as she recalled the horror of what came next. "They made everyone get out: the driver, the guard, 3 passengers, a businessman, a young couple. Quinn demanded their valuables, but the businessman tried to pull a hidden derringer. They shot him immediately. Then," she closed her eyes, forcing herself to continue, "then they killed the others. Even though they'd cooperated, even though the woman was begging for her life." Ethan's expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the arms of the chair. "And they saw you," Olivia nodded. "I must have made a sound. One of them looked up and I ran. They fired after me, but I know these hills. I managed to evade them until last night when they picked up my trail again." "Quinn's not one to give up easily," Ethan said grimly. "Especially not with what he's carrying." Olivia looked at him questioningly. "That stagecoach was transporting a payroll for the Silver Peak mine, $20,000. It wasn't common knowledge, which means Quinn had inside information." Ethan stood, pacing the small confines of the cabin. "The law will be looking for him, but they won't know about you. As far as they're concerned, there were no survivors, no witnesses." "So I'm alone in this," Olivia whispered. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to face her. "No, you're not alone." The conviction in his voice stirred something in Olivia's chest, a cautious hope that perhaps she might survive this after all. Over the next 3 days, Olivia's strength returned gradually. Her ankle remained tender, but the swelling had subsided enough for her to move around the cabin. Ethan kept a vigilant watch, disappearing into the surrounding forest for hours at a time to check for signs of pursuit. Each time he returned, the knot in Olivia's stomach loosened a fraction. On the 4th morning, she was sitting on the cabin's small porch, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her face, when Ethan emerged from the tree line with a rabbit slung over his shoulder. "You're getting cabin fever," he observed, setting his catch down beside her. Olivia smiled ruefully. "Is it that obvious? You've been staring at the hills like they might give you answers." He settled beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "I don't blame you. Being cooped up isn't easy. It's not just that." Olivia wrapped her arms around her knees. "I keep thinking about what happens next. I can't stay hidden forever." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "There's a U.S. Marshal stationed in Copper Springs, about 2 days' ride from here. Name's Harrington. Good man, fair. If we can get you to him, you can give testimony against Quinn." "And then what? Quinn has friends, connections. Even if my testimony puts him behind bars, his associates will come after me." She turned to look at him, her brown eyes serious. "I've been thinking about heading east, starting over where no one knows me. Running isn't freedom," Ethan said softly. "Believe me, I know." Something in his tone made Olivia study him more closely. "What are you running from, Ethan Vance?" He gave a humorless laugh. "What makes you think I'm running? A man doesn't build a cabin this isolated and hunt bounties for a living unless he's trying to escape something." Ethan was silent for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost as if he were talking to himself. "I had a wife once, Caroline, and a daughter, Alice. We had a small ranch outside of Denver, nothing fancy, but it was ours." His eyes fixed on the distant mountains as he continued. 4 years ago, while I was away delivering horses to a buyer, a group of men came to the ranch. Former Confederate soldiers turned outlaws. They'd heard I'd been with the Union cavalry. Olivia's hand moved instinctively to cover his. "Ethan, you don't have to. They burned everything," he continued, as if he hadn't heard her. "The house, the barn, the corrals, Caroline and Alice were inside." His voice broke slightly. "By the time I got back, there was nothing left to save. I tracked those men for 2 years, found each one. Made sure justice was served. And then you came here," Olivia whispered. He nodded. "Thought I could outrun the memories. Turns out they follow you no matter how far you go." Ethan turned his hand over, his fingers lacing with hers. "So when I say running isn't freedom, I'm speaking from experience." Olivia's heart ached for him, for the pain etched into every line of his face. Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to his cheek. "I'm sorry, Ethan, for all of it." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something new. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with unspoken emotions. The crack of a twig in the forest shattered the silence. Ethan was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand, positioning himself between Olivia and the potential threat. "Inside," he ordered quietly. "Now." Olivia hurried into the cabin, her heart racing. Through the window, she watched as Ethan moved cautiously toward the tree line, every muscle tense with anticipation. A deer emerged from the forest, pausing to look at Ethan before bounding away into the underbrush. The tension drained from his shoulders as he lowered his rifle and returned to the cabin. "False alarm," he said, closing the door behind him. "But it's a reminder that we can't stay here much longer. Quinn's men will keep searching, and eventually they'll find this place." "We'll leave tomorrow," Olivia decided. "First light, I'm strong enough to travel now." Ethan nodded, but concern lingered in his eyes. "The ride to Copper Springs won't be easy. We'll have to stick to game trails, avoid the main roads. Quinn's likely to have men watching all the obvious routes." "I trust you," Olivia said simply. That night, as they shared a simple meal of rabbit stew, the atmosphere between them had changed. Something unspoken hummed in the air, a connection forged through shared danger and vulnerability. "Tell me about your life before all this," Ethan said as they sat before the fire. "How does a young woman become a healer in Silver Creek?" Olivia smiled, memories of happier times washing over her. "My father was a doctor in St. Louis. He taught me everything he knew from the time I could read. When he died last year, I came west to start fresh. Dr. Phillips needed an assistant, and Silver Creek needed another healer. You must be good at what you do." "I like to think so." She traced a pattern on the wooden floor with her finger. "I've always believed that healing isn't just about medicines and procedures. It's about caring for the whole person, body and spirit." Ethan's gaze softened. "Your patients are lucky to have you." "We're lucky," she corrected. "I doubt I can go back to Silver Creek now." "Maybe not right away," Ethan conceded. "But someday when Quinn is no longer a threat." Olivia looked up at him, a question in her eyes. "Will you go back to bounty hunting after all this is over?" Ethan hesitated. "I haven't thought that far ahead." "Perhaps it's time you did," she said gently. "Time to stop running." Their eyes met across the fire, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of possibilities neither had considered before. Morning came all too quickly. They packed in silence, gathering only what was essential for the journey ahead. Ethan saddled his horse while Olivia prepared a small bundle of food and medical supplies. "We'll need to be careful crossing open country," Ethan said as he helped her mount. "Stay low in the saddle and keep your eyes open." With one last look at the cabin that had been their sanctuary, they set off toward Copper Springs, the rising sun casting long shadows across the rugged landscape. The first day of travel passed without incident. They kept to the forests and ravines, avoiding the well-traveled paths where Quinn's men might be watching. By nightfall, they had covered nearly 15 miles, good progress, but still a long way from safety. They made camp in a small clearing, sheltered by a stand of pines. Ethan built a small, smokeless fire while Olivia prepared a simple meal from their provisions. "We should reach Jenkins Creek by midday tomorrow," Ethan said, studying a worn map by firelight. "From there, it's another day to Copper Springs." Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread in her stomach. Each mile brought them closer to civilization and to the confrontation that awaited them. She wasn't naive enough to believe that reaching Marshal Harrington would end their troubles. Quinn had powerful friends, and justice in the territories was often bought and sold like any other commodity. "You're worried," Ethan observed, tucking the map away. "Aren't you?" she countered. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Worried, yes, but also determined." He moved to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Olivia, I want you to know something. Whatever happens in Copper Springs, I won't leave your side, not until I know you're safe." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten with emotion. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, the firelight casting shadows across his features. "When I found you in those hills, something changed. For 4 years, I've been existing, not living. Just moving from one day to the next, hunting men who deserved punishment but finding no peace in it." He turned to face her fully. "Then I heard you whisper those words, 'Don't kill me,' and I felt something I thought had died with Caroline and Alice. A purpose, a reason." Olivia's hand found his in the darkness. "What reason? To protect, to care, to maybe find a way back to the man I used to be." His fingers tightened around hers. "I don't expect anything from you, Olivia, but I want you to know that helping you has helped me too." The emotion in his voice undid her. Without hesitation, Olivia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a gesture of comfort that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more necessary. Ethan's arms encircled her, drawing her against his chest as they sank into the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily, eyes wide with surprise and longing. "I didn't plan that," Olivia whispered. Ethan's thumb traced the curve of her cheek. "Neither did I, but I'm not sorry it happened." "Neither am I," she admitted. The fear and uncertainty of their situation made every moment more precious, more immediate. Tonight might be all they had. Under a canopy of stars, with danger still hunting them, they found solace in each other's arms, a brief respite from the harsh realities that awaited them at dawn. Morning came with a misty rain that soaked through their clothes and dampened their spirits. They rode in silence, each lost in thoughts of the night before and the challenges ahead. By noon, the rain had stopped, but dark clouds still threatened on the horizon. "Jenkins Creek should be just beyond that ridge," Ethan said, pointing to a low hill ahead. "There's a trading post there. We can get fresh supplies, maybe hear news about Quinn's whereabouts." As they crested the hill, Olivia's heart sank. Smoke rose from where the trading post should have been, thick black plumes that spoke of destruction. "Something's wrong," Ethan muttered, drawing his rifle. "Stay close." They approached cautiously, the smell of burnt timber growing stronger. What had once been a thriving trading post was now a smoldering ruin. Bodies lay scattered around the remains of the building, 3 men and a woman, all shot at close range. "Quinn," Olivia whispered, her hand covering her mouth in horror. Ethan dismounted, kneeling beside one of the bodies. "This happened yesterday. The bodies are still warm." "Why would he do this? These people weren't witnesses." "Message," Ethan said grimly. "He's letting us know he's still hunting, and he's not far ahead." He stood, scanning the surrounding area. "We need to move. Now." They rode hard for the rest of the day, pushing the horse to its limits. The trading post massacre had shaken them both, bringing home the reality of what they faced. Quinn wasn't just seeking to silence a witness, he was eliminating anyone who might have helped her. As dusk approached, they reached a small stream where Ethan finally allowed them to stop and rest. The horse was lathered with sweat, its sides heaving from the exertion. "We can't keep this pace," Olivia said, washing the dust from her face in the cool water. "The horse won't make it." Ethan nodded, his expression troubled. "We're still a good 15 miles from Copper Springs. At this rate, we won't reach it until tomorrow evening." "And Quinn is ahead of us," Olivia added, "likely waiting in Copper Springs itself, which means we need to find another way in." Ethan pulled out his map again, studying it in the fading light. "There's an old mining trail that skirts the town to the east. It's rough going, but it might let us approach undetected." Olivia joined him, looking over his shoulder at the map. "And once we're there, how do we reach the marshal without Quinn's men seeing us? I have a friend in town, Samuel Porter, runs the livery. If we can get to him, he'll help us contact Harrington." Ethan folded the map and tucked it away. "We should try to get a few hours' sleep. We'll need to leave well before dawn." They made a cold camp that night, not risking a fire that might give away their position. As they huddled together for warmth, Olivia couldn't help but think of how quickly her life had changed. A week ago, she had been tending to patients in Silver Creek, her greatest concern being whether she'd ordered enough willow bark for the coming winter. Now she was running for her life, her only ally a man she barely knew but was rapidly coming to depend on to care for. "Ethan," she whispered in the darkness, "if we make it through this, what then?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that, about what comes after." And his arm tightened around her shoulders. "And I think maybe it's time I stopped living in the past. Started building something new." Olivia's heart quickened. "What would that something be?" "I don't know exactly, but I'd like to find out." He turned to face her, his features barely visible in the moonlight. "With you, if you're willing." Before she could respond, a twig snapped in the darkness beyond their camp. Ethan was on his feet in an instant, rifle raised. "Who's there?" he called. "Show yourself," silence answered him. Then a voice cold, amused, came from the shadows. "Well now, isn't this touching?" The bounty hunter and the witness plotting their escape. 4 men emerged from the trees, rifles aimed at Ethan and Olivia. The leader, a tall man with a shock of white blonde hair, stepped forward. "Jasper Quinn," Ethan said flatly. Quinn's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ethan Vance. Your reputation precedes you. I must say I'm disappointed. I expected it to be harder to track you down." "How did you find us?" Olivia demanded, her voice surprisingly steady despite her fear. Quinn laughed. "You think you're the only ones who can read sign. You've been leaving a trail a blind man could follow." His expression hardened. "And now, Miss Owens, it's time to tie up loose ends." Ethan shifted slightly, placing himself more firmly between Quinn and Olivia. "You don't want to do this, Quinn. Murder witnesses is one thing. Killing a former lawman is another. Every bounty hunter and marshal in the territory will hunt you down." "Former being the operative word," Quinn replied. "No one's going to waste tears on a washed-up bounty hunter and a woman foolish enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time." He gestured to his men. "Take their weapons." One of Quinn's men approached cautiously. As he reached for Ethan's rifle, Ethan moved with lightning speed, striking the man with the butt of his weapon and sending him sprawling. In the same motion, he grabbed Olivia and pulled her behind a large boulder as gunfire erupted around them. "Run," he shouted, firing back at Quinn's men. "Head for the creek bed, I'll cover you." Olivia hesitated, unwilling to leave him. "Ethan, go." He insisted, squeezing off another shot that found its mark in one of Quinn's men's shoulders. "I'll be right behind you." Heart pounding, Olivia ran, ducking low as bullets whizzed past her. She could hear Ethan's rifle firing steadily, providing cover as she made her way to the shallow creek they'd camped beside. The water was cold as she splashed through it, heading downstream where the banks rose higher, offering some protection. Behind her, the gunfire intensified, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the chaos had been. "Ethan," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer came. Olivia crouched in the creek bed, torn between running for her life and going back to help the man who had risked everything to protect her. The decision was made for her when footsteps approached from upstream. "Found her trail," one of Quinn's men called. "She went this way." Gripping the small knife Ethan had given her, Olivia moved downstream as quietly as possible, keeping to the deepest part of the creek where her footprints wouldn't show. The night was moonless now, clouds having rolled in to obscure the stars, and she used the darkness to her advantage. After what felt like hours of wading through the cold water, she came to a place where the creek widened and deepened. Exhausted and chilled to the bone, Olivia climbed out onto the bank and collapsed behind a fallen log, straining to hear any sounds of pursuit. All was quiet except for the gentle gurgle of the creek. Had she lost them? Or were they simply waiting, knowing she had nowhere to go? And what of Ethan? The thought that he might be dead because of her was almost unbearable. In the short time they'd known each other, he had become more than just her protector. He had become a promise of what life could be if only they survived this ordeal. As dawn broke, Olivia made a decision. She wouldn't run any further. Copper Springs was still miles away, and she had no horse, no supplies, and little chance of reaching it before Quinn's men found her. Instead, she would circle back, discover what had happened to Ethan. If he was alive, they would face Quinn together. If he was dead, well, she would make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Moving cautiously through the underbrush, Olivia retraced her steps, staying well away from the creek where she might be spotted. The forest was eerily quiet, no birds singing, no small animals rustling in the leaves as if the whole world was holding its breath. She was nearing their former campsite when she heard voices. Dropping to her stomach, Olivia crawled forward until she could see through a gap in the foliage. Quinn stood in the clearing, looking down at something or someone on the ground. With a jolt of fear, Olivia realized it was Ethan, bound and bleeding from a wound in his side. "I'll ask you one more time," Quinn was saying, his voice cold with anger. "Where is she headed?" Ethan's laugh was weak but defiant. "You really think I'm going to tell you that?" Quinn kicked him hard in the ribs, drawing a grunt of pain. "She's not worth dying for, Vance. She's nothing to you, just a woman who was in the wrong place at the wrong time." "You're wrong," Ethan managed. "She's worth everything." The sincerity in his voice made Olivia's heart clench. Even now, facing death, he was protecting her. Quinn sighed dramatically. "Have it your way." He drew his pistol and pointed it at Ethan's head. "Any last words?" "Just one," Ethan replied, his eyes flicking briefly to the trees where Olivia was hidden. "Duck." Before Quinn could react, a shot rang out from the opposite side of the clearing. One of Quinn's men fell, clutching his chest. Another shot followed immediately, dropping a second man. Quinn spun, firing wildly into the trees as he sought cover. Ethan rolled away, despite his bonds, seeking shelter behind a fallen log. More shots came from the trees, and Olivia realized with a surge of hope that someone was helping them. "But who?" "U.S. Marshal," a voice bellowed from the forest. "Drop your weapons." Quinn's remaining man threw down his gun, raising his hands in surrender. Quinn himself stood his ground, pistol still clutched in his hand. "This doesn't concern the law, Harrington," he called. "This is personal business." 5 dead at a stagecoach robbery and 4 more at Jenkins Creek is the law's business, came the reply. "It's over, Quinn." For a moment, it seemed Quinn might surrender. Then, with a snarl of rage, he swung his pistol toward Ethan, who was struggling to free himself from his bonds. Olivia didn't think, didn't plan. She simply acted. Bursting from her hiding place, she threw herself forward, tackling Quinn just as he fired. The bullet went wild, and they both crashed to the ground, Quinn's pistol flying from his grip. With a roar of fury, Quinn rolled, pinning Olivia beneath him, his hands closing around her throat. She clawed at his wrists, fighting for breath as black spots danced before her eyes. Suddenly, Quinn's weight was torn away. "Ethan," somehow free of his bonds, had thrown himself at Quinn despite his injuries. The two men grappled in the dirt, each fighting with desperate intensity. Quinn was stronger, healthier, but Ethan fought with the determination of a man who had found something worth living for. He managed to land a solid blow to Quinn's jaw, stunning him momentarily. It was all the advantage he needed. Grabbing a rock from the ground, Ethan brought it down hard on Quinn's temple. The outlaw went limp, unconscious but still breathing. "Olivia," Ethan gasped, crawling to where she lay, still struggling to catch her breath. "Olivia, speak to me." She reached for him, her hands finding his face. "You're alive," she whispered hoarsely. "I thought I'm not that easy to kill," he said, helping her to sit up. "Are you hurt?" Before she could answer, men emerged from the trees, 6 of them, led by a tall, gray-haired man with a marshal's badge pinned to his vest. "Cutting it a bit close, weren't you, Harrington?" Ethan called, still holding Olivia protectively. Marshal Harrington approached, holstering his pistol. "Got here as fast as I could after getting your friend Porter's message." He looked down at Quinn's unconscious form. "Been after this one for months. Never thought he'd be foolish enough to show his face so close to Copper Springs." "He was desperate," Olivia said, her voice raspy from Quinn's assault. "I was the only witness who could tie him to the stagecoach robbery." Harrington nodded. "And now we have him, thanks to you both." He gestured to his deputies. "Get these men secured. Quinn rides in the wagon. I want him watched every second." As the deputies set about their tasks, Harrington turned back to Ethan and Olivia. "Porter said you two might need medical attention. There's a doctor waiting in town." Ethan's arm tightened around Olivia's shoulders. "We'll be all right." "Just need a moment." Understanding flickered in the marshal's eyes. With a nod, he moved away, giving them space. "How did the marshal know to find us?" Olivia asked, leaning into Ethan's embrace despite the pain it caused them both. "Samuel Porter," Ethan explained. "When I realized Quinn was tracking us, I sent our horse ahead with a message tied to the saddle. Oldest trick in the book, but it worked." He winced as he shifted position. "Porter and I served together in the cavalry. I knew he'd get word to Harrington." Olivia touched the makeshift bandage on his side, now soaked with blood. "You need a doctor." "So do you," he countered, gently touching the bruises forming on her throat. "But we're alive. Quinn's captured. It's over." She shook her head. "Not quite over. There's still the matter of what comes next." Ethan's eyes met hers, warm with an emotion she hadn't dared name until now. "I meant what I said to Quinn. You're worth everything, Olivia. These past days with you, they've shown me that there's still life to be lived if I'm brave enough to reach for it." "And are you?" she asked softly. "Brave enough?" Instead of answering with words, Ethan leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle promise that spoke of healing, of new beginnings, of a future neither had imagined possible a week ago. When they finally parted, Olivia smiled through tears of relief and joy. "I'll take that as a yes." Ethan's laugh was tender as he helped her to her feet. "Let's get to Copper Springs. We have testimonies to give, wounds to heal, and a life to start building." Hand in hand, they walked toward the waiting marshal, each step taking them farther from the dangers they'd faced and closer to the future they would create together. 4 months later, Olivia stood on the porch of a newly built cabin, watching as Ethan worked with the horses in the corral. Spring had come to the foothills outside Copper Springs, bringing with it new growth and possibilities. After Quinn's trial and subsequent hanging, they had chosen to stay in the area. Copper Springs needed a healer, and Olivia had found her skills in high demand. Ethan, with his knowledge of horses and the respect he'd earned helping bring Quinn to justice, had been offered a position as deputy marshal, an offer he'd accepted after much consideration. The cabin they'd built sat on a gentle slope overlooking a meadow, far enough from town to offer peace but close enough for both their work. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, a home built with their own hands and filled with the promise of tomorrow. As if sensing her thoughts, Ethan looked up from his work, his smile warming her from across the yard. In that moment, Olivia remembered the words that had changed everything, her desperate plea in the face of death, and his answer that had given her not just safety, but love. "Don't kill me," she had whispered. "I'll give you life," he had promised, and he had kept that promise in ways neither could have imagined.